Welcome to the Studio Chat podcast. My name is Barbara Thompson. Each week, I'll be bringing you a self-care expert or a message to help you to discover how to live your best life and understand your mind-body connection. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now, let the Studio Chat begin. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Studio Chat podcast. My name is Barbara. I'm the host of this podcast. I'd like to introduce my special guest today. Her name is Maddi. Hi, Maddi. How are you?
Hey, Barbara. I'm good. Thank you.
Now, I'm very excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to touch on things like binge eating and emotional eating, and we're going to talk about how they're actually really different from each other. And before we get into that, what I'd like to do is give Maddi a bit of an introduction so people know, who you are and what you do. And you're a disordered eating and non-diet dietitian.
Yeah.
What does someone like that do? And can you share a little bit about yourself with us?
Yeah, for sure. So as you said, I'm a non-diet and disordered eating dietitian. Basically, what that means is I work predominantly with anybody that wants to improve their relationship with food and or their bodies. So whether that be in the context of a full-blown eating disorder or just general health and well-being as well. It's a bit of a spectrum.
Because anyone that's listening to this, if they clicked on binge eating or emotional eating, I'm sure it was something that resonated with them on some level. It could be them themselves, a family member, a friend, or a child. And I'd love to bring some normality to this conversation we have today. It's a really common thing. You're not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. And it's really tough because a lot of it is still done in secret and behind closed doors, and you can feel really alone. And this whole thing with what do I eat today? How do I care for myself? How do I live in a healthy body can really rob us of life. Like there's so many rules now with what's a good food, what's a bad food. Okay, we're told that there are no good or bad foods. I got that. Okay. And the next level is what's healthy and what's unhealthy, and what do I feed myself and what do I feed my children to be a good parent? So I'm sure you may see this stuff, in your clinic. So
absolutely.
You mentioned with us who you work with. I'd love to know your why behind what you do.
Yeah, so my why mainly is I want to support and empower and inspire other people to cultivate a healthy relationship with food and their bodies. That's kind of like my brand's mission statement, I suppose you can say. And why that is so important to me is because I myself in the past have struggled with disordered eating. Looking back, while it was definitely not a clinically diagnosed eating disorder, 100% I had binge eating disorder. I just, as you said earlier, felt so much shame and secrecy around it that I never wanted to reach out for support until I obviously ended up doing so. And it was the best thing that I ever did because now I'm living such a free and fulfilling life. That's really sparked my passion. So, yeah.
Yeah. And those thoughts, as especially as females, we all know that we can think of 100 million things at once. And I'm sure even you and I recording this podcast, our brains are also probably thinking about what's for dinner, what are we doing tomorrow? We're very capable human beings that our thoughts can be so layered. And when we think about food, there's so many rules, there's so many how we were brought up in a family and how we had dinner at the dinner table. There'd be emotions and thoughts and beliefs around that, and then the diet culture itself, and then wanting to lose weight or be healthy. There's so many. Food is food, but within that, if anyone's listening to this, you'll have your own personal story and journey of what food means to you.
Absolutely. It's so ingrained into every aspect of life. My friends know this, but I obviously don't really talk about it much in a professional capacity, but I wish that I was Italian. It is just my lifelong dream. And for the reason that food is such an integral part of their social connections and their family and their identity and the way that they show love to one another. And I just think that's amazing. But definitely there can be such a negative downside on it, as you have just shared as well.
Yeah. And also, if anyone is not sure of my background, is I used to be one of the general managers of Jenny Craig in New Zealand. It was the biggest centre in Australasia that I used to manage. Wow. And I managed that centre when I was 22.
Wow, okay.
It was a big job for me.
Yeah.
And little did I know my own personal journey was going to come from that, but also what I do now. It was interesting to see when you're in that stuck place, you become almost vulnerable and desperate to be like, I need to fix this, or I'm broken, or I can't do this anymore. And it's interesting to see that when you're in that moment of vulnerability, when I was working for Jenny Craig, I could see women like reaching out, like basically saying, I'll do anything. Can you just fix me? And here we were giving them like set mood, food plans and stuff to eat, which was severely under eating. Let me just say.
Yeah.
But it was like, it's when you do reach out for help too, I would really love women to know, or people to know that are listening to this, is like do a bit of research and talk to people who have seen someone, because I've seen the other side of this is when you do go and reach out for help, it can give you, like, there's a lot of gut health protocols and stuff out there now, and a lot of women reach out for that, and then they actually disrupt their gut more and then learn more rules and more, I should do this and I can't do this, than ever before.
Yes, absolutely. It's shocking.
and Maddi, they were brave enough to reach out for help. I too have had my own experience with binge eating and emotional eating, and we'll talk about those in a minute of how different they are. And a lot of it with me is to do with comfort, and as a mechanism to sometimes cope through some really hard stuff. And it can be, I think I've seen somewhere in one of your ebooks or like your email newsletter that comes out, something about that. Sometimes we can use food as something to lean on and as a comfort. And in those moments, it's okay.
Yeah.
So we can learn some other things to help us to not rely on that all the time.
Yeah. Food is a comfort, and food is something that soothes us, whether that be in a positive or a negative light. As you just said, like, I personally feel like the issue lies when it's like our only coping mechanism or our only comfort. So it's building up, other things in that imaginary toolkit to lean on as well.
Yeah. And I think food too is hard because it can seem harder than other things because we need food to survive.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know where the rule or thought came from that women need to eat like sparrow farts. Like, women need to eat sweet FA to be healthy or to lose weight, or it's the thing to do as a woman. Like, there's a myth or a belief that you only eat small amounts, or it's best not to eat if you want to lose weight. All of that kind of what am I trying to say? That stigma and belief. Do you hear that often?
100%. The way I kind of break it down for my clients is we have thoughts, whether they're like our personal thoughts or in the context that we've grown up, or from our parents, or been transferred onto us from like dieting messages or social media, that sort of stuff. And they inherently affect our beliefs if we choose to subscribe to them. And as a result, if we're believing something to be true, that's going to affect our actions. So around, I guess, the ideal, I should say, that a woman has to look a certain way, that's coming from everywhere outside of us from a very, very young age. It's hard for that not to turn into a belief or a personal belief that we hold true to ourselves.
And acknowledging that we all have a fingerprint. Or, and so that means our fingerprints there's no one that has the same fingerprint than us. And so it's our body and our genetics and who we are as a person. So who's to say that what I eat, if you and I eat the same thing, it'll show up differently in our bodies. It will feel different. It will look different. And one food can be okay for someone and not someone else. But just acknowledging that even if as a planet or as like human beings, if we all ate the same thing and did exactly the same stuff, we would still all look very different.
Yes, exactly. Exactly what you just said is what I say to every single one of my clients because of something called set point theory. It's that in our genes, in our DNA, our body has our own unique, happy, healthy weight.
Mm.
And that looks different for everybody.
Yeah. And also something that I found really interesting was, if anyone's listening to this and they're like, I move my body, I eat good food, I do the right thing, why am I not feeling good, or why am I not seeing changes, or why? A lot of it is to do with our lifestyle, but our stress. So I really believe and truly believe that stress is a big overarching blanket that can cover our life and cover our health if we're not aware of it. If we didn't actually know that we can do all the good things, but if we have a really stressful or anxious lifestyle, it blankets all the good stuff.
Yeah.
And kind of crosses everything out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll never forget, and it sounds a little bit strange, I'm going slightly off topic here, but I'll never forget the moment my mum told me, who at the time when I was in her tummy, she was a smoker. And I'll never forget the time she told me that her doctor at the time when she was pregnant with me, she was obviously quitting smoking and not smoking because she had a baby, and she was quite stressed out about it. And the doctor said to her, look, stress is worse for the baby and for your health right now than one cigarette. So as obviously taboo looking back in this day and age as that is, yeah, stress is such a, I guess, a risk factor for overall health in so many areas.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because that's not the first time I've heard that. I actually know of people, and this is, guys, I don't want you to come at me going this is bad, but and recommending it or anything, but I do know of a handful of women that during their pregnancy, their doctors and specialists had advised them to still keep going what they were doing. I'm not going to give any numbers, I'm not going to say, but it's along the lines of having a cigarette, because their body was so used to it, and it's less than being stressed out, and it would harm. Like, it was just such an interesting thing. It was like, that's not okay.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely didn't agree to it when my mum shared that. But looking back and I guess finding out a little bit more through my work about how dangerous and how much, stress can have an implication on health, it definitely makes sense. Definitely not advising it though at all to anybody listening this.
Because we're talking about some amazing things in the podcast, and we don't want to, but yeah, so interesting. It's normal. Binge eating is really normal. So what we hear that word all the time. What actually is binge eating?
That is an excellent question. So by definition, binge eating is actually a diagnosable eating disorder. And on average, it affects up to like 6% of the Australian population. It's actually one of the most common eating disorders globally. So I'm just trying to remember the statistic. I think it's about 47% of people living with an eating disorder have binge eating disorder, which is huge considering, I guess, all the different eating disorders that there are now. In terms of, whether it's more common in males or females, equally, that's probably one of the only eating disorders where it's pretty equal across genders, and it can occur in any weight, shape or size, which is a huge myth that it only exists, or it can only be, I guess, experienced in people living in larger bodies, which is definitely not the case. I guess if we were to look at what characterizes binge eating, binge eating or binge eating disorder, either or, it's typically eating within a pretty discrete period of time. So, a couple of hours or an hour, feeling, I guess, an uncontrollable need to eat. So let's say hypothetically, if someone, told you to stop, or if you yourself wanted to stop, you just couldn't. It's that sense of loss of control when eating. And a lot of my clients as well have sort of reported like a trance-like state when they are engaging in that binge eating. And personally, I can definitely resonate with that. You sort of have almost a blackout until after the fact.
I can relate to that too. It's almost like leading up to it, it's all you think about. You get excited about it during the day or during the evening, like you're really excited for the biscuits or the chips or the ice cream. And then when you open the packet or open the tub, you're like a little kid, you're so excited. And then when you have the first couple of bites, it's like euphoria. It's like, yay, like I am so ecstatically, there's not there's nothing pleasurable more than that. And when you binge eat, you know what I'm talking about. And then have the first few bites or first couple of cookies, whatever it is. Then you go and reach for the next cookie, the next chip, or put your spoon in the tub and you go, oh shit, there's nothing left.
Yeah, absolutely. You look down and the plate's empty or the packet's empty. And yeah, it's almost like, how did that happen? I just, I swear I just started eating.
Yeah, well, I always call it when I work with my clients, I say, and we're back. Like, like hypnotherapy, like you're away somewhere. And then it's like you click your fingers and you're like, and we're in the room. And you go, oh, like, and then the
exactly.
thoughts and the self-hate and the self-loathing. And then the rules come up. Oh, I did this. Right. Tomorrow I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to do this. You make all these, promises to yourself. They're bargaining that, okay, I did this, so I'm going to cut everything out or whatever someone is thinking about. What causes us to binge eat?
There definitely are a fair few reasons why someone might engage in binge eating. When I'm explaining this to my clients and I guess getting them to reflect on what their own personal triggers for binging are, I like to break it up into three main categories or three main causes. So we've got the physical, the psychological, and the emotional regulation. So what I mean by physical is physical restriction, i.e. not eating enough food, whether that be through intentional or unintentional restriction, dieting, fasting, that sort of thing. Psychological or mental restriction. So having rules around food, or as you were saying earlier, having labels like good and bad or healthy and unhealthy around food. And as soon as that food rule is inevitably broken, because we're humans, we're meant to eat, it creates that like a bugger at what the hell effect where you might engage in binge eating because it's like, well, I've already blown it, might as well keep going.
Yeah, resonate. I'm sure a lot of us are like nodding our heads going, yep, you're talking about me right there.
Yeah, exactly. And the last one is emotional regulation. So using food to soothe or to numb certain emotions, whether that be because you've got like a history of trauma or because you're feeling really uncomfortable in your body or feeling fat. For people that are listening, I'm using bunny ears here, or just feeling quite lonely or isolated or generally down. So they're the three main categories. And it's just that cycle, as you said earlier, it's that, restriction or breaking a rule or feeling a certain way that leads onto that binging. And then, it's like, oh, I'll be really good. I'll start again tomorrow. Like tomorrow's a new day. And then the cycle just goes around and around and around.
It's very hard to break it. It's very shameful. No one likes to talk about it. Even you don't share it with your closest friends or family, and it doesn't discriminate. Like it doesn't matter if you're in a bigger body or a smaller body or whatever your body looks like. Everybody can experience binge eating at some point in their life.
100%. I have clients, their bodies range across, a variety of different shapes and sizes. I myself, not that I really like to talk about myself in this capacity too often, but just for the sake of the podcast, I consider myself to be living in a pretty smaller body, and I experience binge eating and, people, I guess, have that stigma that, oh, she couldn't possibly be doing that. Like, look at her, but it happens more than you would think.
Yeah, it does. And any age, can we
any age.
Yeah. So it's not just a teenager thing or an early 20s thing. You could pick this up in your 40s or your 50s or what, there's no anybody, anytime.
Absolutely. It's actually incredibly common to develop or to be, I guess, more made aware of in women as they approach that menopausal age, what with like body changes. And that's a hard process in of itself, and all the hormones fluctuating and your mood and your mental health can, fluctuate with that. And yeah, that's like a perfect storm for binge eating, really.
And also with binge eating, I find that it can be interested to see what you think of this. I feel that binge eating also can be connected to sleep. And if we don't get enough sleep on the right, there's different hormones that are produced in our bodies at certain times in our circadian rhythm, during the sleep cycle and during the night. And if we don't get to sleep early enough, what happens is, if you're someone like me, like, you know, I'm working on this, so I'm not perfect. Never will be. I will always be honest, but I've really struggled with getting to bed early enough because I've always been a night person. And research shows that I think it's before 10:30, between like 10 and 11:30 or something, is a hormone that's is produced in your body that stops you like craving sugar the next day. So if you don't get enough sleep, but the right quality of sleep, you could have all the willpower in the world and you could actually, you know, be a good person. Again, I'm using like the quotation things, but if your body hasn't had enough restful sleep, biologically, it knows that we can open the pantry now, or we can open the fridge and we can get an endorphin rush within 1 minute, and that can like help our brain.
Yeah, it's that. And to be honest with you, Barbara, I haven't really dived too much into the research for this, but it's so interesting. I guess a few thoughts here. It sounds as though that definitely is on par with that emotional regulation. So if we're feeling quite exhausted and quite tired, maybe a bit irritable, but using food to soothe that emotion. And as you said, like our hunger hormones, we know that they're elevated when you're not having enough sleep or, you know, good quality sleep. So things like ghrelin, which is the body's hunger hormone, that can be elevated. That can make us more hungry. Maybe in someone that's trying to be quote unquote good, if they find they're more hungry on a particular day because they've had a horrible night's sleep or just in general haven't been getting enough sleep, that can instill a lot of shame and guilt and precipitate that binge cycle.
Yeah, and shame and guilt that you're weak and it's only bloody food. Like, why can't I stop? Because we can look around and be like, everyone's got this food thing nailed. Like, you know, I don't know about you, but it can be so easy to slip into that belief that as you look around at people, they're nailing life. They, you know, can go to restaurants and eat food, but still train and still, you know, be healthy and feel good. When you're someone that's, you know, struggling with binge eating or emotional eating, it can feel really lonely, because we can look around, especially with social media, and be like, man, everyone can have the bowls and the smoothies or whatever you believe to be healthy. And you can feel really isolated and feeling like no one understands how you feel.
Absolutely. I have a few clients recently and also in the past that obviously I'm not going to name names, but are, you know, quite public social media figures, so influencers and things of the like, or models, and people make assumptions about them. Wow, they've got their life together. Look at them. They look so beautiful. They look so good. They're struggling with the same things everybody else is struggling with. In fact, it's, oh, sorry, you go.
Yeah. No, you go.
In fact, it's even, I guess, I have a bit of extra compassion for them because, you know, this world that we live in, it would be a lot harder for them to have that courage and have that bravery to reach out for support, given the assumptions that are made about them.
Yeah, exactly. And what sometimes they earn money from it too. So of course, some of them will say, this is what I eat in a day, or this is what I eat on my plate. Not necessarily true. It's not saying that they're not being truthful, but it's their job and it's their role to sell the supplements or sell the protein powder or whatever. And they probably can't come and talk about it on their social media because their brand and their business is aligned with a different look and feel.
Exactly. I know definitely there are a lot more laws and legislations being put in place around like truthful advertising, particularly with influencers, but it's still definitely a big discrepancy between what someone is actually eating and what they're promoting.
Yeah, exactly. So the next thing I'm interested to know is, how is binge eating different to emotional eating?
That is such a good question. I get it all the time, and it can be, I guess, very easy, very common, I should say, to associate the two together when they're in fact super different. So the way that I like to explain emotional eating is that we all do it, whether that be in a positive light or a negative light. If you think of a positive emotional eating, it's like having a birthday cake for someone's birthday, or sharing an ice cream with your loved one, or a sweet treat, something like that. But it can also be the negative, where you're feeling quite down or quite sad and using food to fill that void. The way that it differentiates from binge eating is because it's not commonly characterized by that restriction afterwards. And there's not as much at all in some people, or most people, I should say, that sense of loss of control. Like they're conscious of the fact that they're eating to fill a certain hole. They're conscious of the fact that they're doing this. And if they wanted to stop, they could. Whereas with binge eating, as we were saying earlier, it's that sense of loss of control. It's that urgency over eating. It's that trance-like state. I hope that makes sense.
So is emotional eating something that we kind of do rather than label it as like a good or bad thing? It's just we all have emotions, we all eat food. Is that probably an easy way to say it? Is that, yeah, we all have emotions, we all eat food, we have different occasions and different traditions, and that's kind of where it lays, where there's no ongoing effect.
Yeah, exactly as you said. It's not that it's not like a snowball effect into other areas or other problems. It's something that we all do. We're all human. We're all emotionally eat from time to time and overeat. I guess the way that I sort of look at it, right, you've got a tool belt on and you've got certain tools that you use to cope with certain things in life. Emotional eating is just one of them. It can become a bit problematic when it's the only tool that someone might lean on. But it's something that I guess I don't professionally or personally see as inherently all a negative thing, I should say.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I know people, if you are talking to a girlfriend and you go, oh yeah, I do that, like it's really easy to label something or say we do something when, we really don't. And that kind of leads on to self-control, because a lot of people think that I think of the words discipline, willpower, like motivation, all that kind of stuff, I feel is labeled into that group of words. So is binge eating to do with us not, having enough control, self-control?
This has to be one of my favorite things to talk about in the context of binge eating. It is the biggest misconception, I have to say, that I definitely have heard, and that I hear a lot of other people talking about it. Like I even have clients that come to me in the beginning, they're like, oh, I just wish I had a little bit more self-control or willpower, and I know I could really nail this on the head. It's a misconception, as I said before. It has nothing to do with willpower. Binge eating, and I don't love to use the label because I find it quite abrasive, but if we looked at it clinically, it's a mental health illness. It has no connection or relation to willpower. So if we look at people that experience binge eating, around 29% of those people are seeking weight loss treatment or weight loss support, because they believe, or they I guess hold the belief, I should say, that they're lacking willpower or self-control or discipline. And if they lose the weight or do this thing a little bit differently with a meal plan or an exercise regime, they'll be fine. They'll be able to get on top of it, when that's definitely not the case. I can see you nodding, Barbara.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, specifically, I'm a science nerd, if you haven't already worked out. I love facts and figures because it just really brings to life, people's lived experiences as well. But if we look at people living in larger bodies, 52% of people that are living in larger bodies and seeking support for weight loss through like programs or diets or different things, they meet the criteria for binge eating disorder, 52%. Which is just insane.
God, that is insane. Yeah, because we're talking a lot about beliefs and thoughts today. There is something again that we've picked up, that if we look a certain way, and this is at my core what my business is all about and what I'm about, because I want to bring light to this to women, that you may be listening to this and think, if you're looking at weight loss or wanting to be healthier, oh, when I get to this thing, I will be X, whatever that is. And, for me, I've had my own disordered eating habits and body image issues and all sorts of things happening. And what I know to be true is I'm a lived experience that I have got the perfect body and I got the, the fitness and everything down packed, and I wasn't healthy and I wasn't happy. Like my body is different today. But for anyone listening to this, I'd like you to know that if you are chasing that thing, that thing will not make you happy, because when you get to that thing, you still feel exactly the same, if that makes sense. And that's where you said that it is, like, it is kind of labeled as a mental disorder, it's to do with our brains.
Yeah.
Because if anyone looks back on an old photo of themselves and they go, oh God, what was I even worried about? I wasn't even, like, the words big or fat or whatever you want to insert there. It's a common thing that I see too. And I've done it myself. I look back and go, what was I even worried about? Like, why was I so obsessed with food? Why was I so obsessed with my body? Why did it rule my life 24/7? I had nothing to worry about. And what that shows us is it was never about the weight or the body. It's about our beautiful brain that we need to support, and we need to heal, and we need to understand the way we think and the way we believe about ourselves.
Absolutely. I'm so, so glad that you spoke to that with a personal example. And for anyone listening, I'm going to chuck in my own personal experience. When, that little voice, it's like, when we lose weight or when we achieve this goal, everything will be better. We'll be so much happier. Personally, just to sort of back up your example, Barbara, when I had achieved that goal that I set out for myself, I was miserable. I slept like shit. My mental health was so deteriorated. It was ridiculous. I isolated myself from my friends and family. My friends actually have a running joke now. They're beautiful. I love them. I've been friends with them for like over 10 years now, but they're like, we lost you for a good year because you just became so withdrawn from us, because I was just in pursuit of this unattainable goal that I'd set myself, which is, yeah, as you said, once you reach it, and look, if you really want to reach it, you probably can. It's not worth it.
Yeah, but it's also I don't want to derail anyone that is listening to this that has goals. Like, life is important to know where we want to go. It's really important to have a goal, achieve things. But anyone that's achieved things in life, whether you've bought, like, another example is, you've had your eye on a car for a long time. I love using this analogy, like, it's your dream car, and you do your research and you get really excited, and then you buy the car, and probably for the first month, anyone that has, and I'm not saying a new car is off the lot, like, a new car can be a new car, however that looks to someone. But, you want to pick everyone up and drive them around, and I'll go down to the shops and get this, you just love driving it, and it's got all the bells and whistles. And then I would say by week 5 or 6, if that, you start to notice that everyone else, I didn't realize that this car was so popular. There's so many on the road. Everyone's got this car. But also, it's just a car now.
Exactly. I just finished reading Lyndi Cohen's new book. What's it called? Your Weight is Not the Problem. Sorry, Lyndi, if you're listening to this. It's a fantastic book.
Yeah, I've got a copy of that, and I've read a little bit of it, and she's said that she'll come on my podcast at some stage too. So
that's amazing. I'm like the biggest fangirl of her. I think she's absolutely magnificent. But something that she writes in the book that really just stuck in my mind is, it's not worth giving up 95% of your life to weigh 5% less, which is honestly pretty much most of the goals that we set ourselves in the context of, weight in our bodies.
Yeah. It's so interesting. And it's so interesting too, like, we're getting very personal here, Maddi. We're getting I always wanted to look a certain way, and I was someone that it was as a childhood, I was always told horrible things. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for myself, but my family revolved around how we looked. That was kind of like the number one thing. And at the same time, I had parents that would constantly pull me down. You're not good enough. You're fat. You're ugly. No one want to be with you. You won't be loved. Like, anytime I tried to make myself look, put a bit of makeup on or something, I was told I looked cheap and nasty. And there were so many things that were so heavy for me. And so now I've lost my train of thought. When I get personal, my brain's like, no, Barbara, don't share this with people.
No, I'm really glad that you shared that.
So I can't remember what I was saying now. It's something to do with how we're so obsessed with how we look. So I know people, as many of us that wake up in the morning and we think about our food and our bodies and our weight, as soon as we open our eyes to, when we're asleep and when we're dreaming, And when you live a life like that, it does rob you from going to events, seeing people. Here's my point. Right, here we go. So I'm in a bigger body now than I've ever been. And people treat me almost, I've got to be careful with how I say this. The right people that I have around me love me just as much as more than what I was before. So I was seeking that outside validation that I'll be good enough when I'm a certain size. Yeah. But also being in a bigger body, I have learned to heal the inner child of myself, the inner person of myself, which is always a lifelong process. But what it does is it enables me to have my own back, really care and love myself, but also externally choose people in my life that love me for me and are really good to have around, if that kind of makes sense. So yeah, being in a bigger body, once I've done the inside work and learnt to love myself, that people are so nice around me. Like I'd always, I've got the best people around me that I've ever had in my entire life.
It's amazing.
Yeah, how I feel about myself, likes attract likes. So I surround myself with people that accept them for who they are. Yeah, we go through hard times. We go through tough times. We all don't love our bodies 100%.
No.
There's no way, but it's such a weird concept for even me saying this now, weird concept for my brain and my heart to say out loud that I truly love who I am, which is like, what?
Yeah, no, it's so true though. And it's definitely it's amazing that you've got such a good support network. That's fundamental to, not just health in this context, but health across the board.
Yeah, it's so important. So anyway, that was like a bit of sharing. So next is I'd love to talk to you about how to overcome binge eating and the role that you do, Maddi, as a dietitian.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when it comes to overcoming binge eating or breaking free from that binge cycle, it does look different for everybody. As I was saying earlier, there's so many potential different complex triggers for people that keep them stuck in that binge cycle. So the degree, I guess, of, what's contributing to the binge eating and what's keeping you stuck really influences, I should say, what treatment looks like. So there's a range of different treatment modalities, whether it be like group support or self-help, or there's also guided self-help. So it's like doing things yourself, but also getting that extra layer of support from a professional like a dietitian like myself, or a psychologist, or both. It's really complex. So I personally, obviously a little bit biased here, and I guess personally and professionally, right? So having, an experience of binge eating myself, I can absolutely see, the value of working with a dietitian and or psychologist, just to, I guess, be that non-biased perspective, on your team that's going to challenge you in a good way and also help you keep moving forward and get you unstuck.
Can I ask you, put you on the spot here? As you've moved through your binge eating to where you are now, how is your relationship with food?
My relationship with food is the best it's ever been. But when I say that, I'm not at all pretending that there's not bad days, because as you said before, it's so unlikely for someone to be entirely happy with themselves. From a food perspective, my relationship with food, I personally think is amazing. Would my relationship with my body be the same? Probably not.
Yeah. Thank you for being so honest with that. And because they come hand in hand, I think, when we talk about binge eating today, emotional eating, we can't forget our friend, our body, because it all kind of does go together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so intertwined. And I guess, when I speak about that relationship with food, what has helped me and what has helped a lot of my clients as well, and listening to other professionals in this field, I guess having that gratitude and understanding that, look, you might not love every single part of the way you look or your body or, your appearance, but what else is important to you in your life, whether that be friends, family, work, sport, And what's helped me is, I guess, anchor down and sort of remember those things when times are tough. Personally, I love running, and to run, I need to eat a lot of food, namely carbs. If I'm not eating those, I feel like shit. So whenever I have that little pesky voice, it's like, oh, there's a little bit of carbs in this. I'm like, well, no, I love running. And that's something that's so important to me socially and for my mental health as well. And to do that, I do need carbs, quite a lot of them, actually.
Yeah, we need to eat.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So when we talk about binge eating, there's a type of eating that people may have heard before called intuitive eating.
Yeah.
Can you share with us, tell us a bit more about intuitive eating?
Yeah, absolutely. I am like a fangirl for intuitive eating. I've actually recently just launched an online course or program for it because I think it's just the best thing ever. It can be so beneficial in improving that relationship with food on your body when we hone into how it can help, or if it can help with binge eating. In a nutshell, intuitive eating is tuning out that outside buzz, all those external factors or influences that sort of tell us what, when, and how much to eat. So social media, diet culture, parents, family, friends, yada, yada, yada. And it's learning to eat in a way that feels good to you and only you, physically and mentally. So there's so many studies, and I know it can sound a little bit woo-woo, and I have a few clients that raise eyebrows when I start talking about intuitive eating. It's been very well backed up by quite rigorous academic studies. So there's a lot of data and a lot of evidence to show it's beneficial. When it comes to binge eating, I personally believe it can be suitable for some and not suitable for others straight off the bat, because it does, inherently rely on trusting your body and relying on your body cues. So while every practitioner does have a different approach, I have found that when it comes to, I guess, paving the way for breaking free from binge eating, having a bit more of a structured and strategic approach can actually be more helpful, rather than, I guess, it feeling like someone's just telling you to eat whatever, whenever, because that can be really distressing and quite triggering for some people, especially if they've been living with binge eating for a while. So I guess moving along the lines of going from binge eating perhaps to a bit more of a structured and strategic approach to, I guess, reduce those binge eating instances, whether that be the size or the frequency of the binges, and coming up with that stability around food. So establishing that regular and adequate eating pattern, getting back those hunger and fullness cues and building back that body trust. And once you're in that place, then absolutely it's so amazing to go on into, more of an intuitive eating or an intuitive way of eating. But I like to think of it as a bit of a stepped approach, for the reason that jumping from binge eating all the way to intuitive eating can actually, do some harm in people.
Yeah. And you mentioned something called body cues, which is really, I find really fascinating. And it's really interesting too, because I know when hunger presents itself in my body, my hunger cues not necessarily are when my stomach grumbles. Sometimes I can feel a bit tired, or, I just feel like oh God, I feel really flat. Oh, I need to eat. So sometimes our body cues with hunger can look so different, and it changes as we age. It can look different for all of us. And the other thing too, I find that before we have a meal, before we eat, how often do we ask ourselves genuinely, what do I feel like?
Yeah. Exactly.
What does my body, what do I feel like, with no rules, no good or bad, healthy or unhealthy? And because we don't stop, we're go, hustle culture, grind. I'm so busy. So if you go, what do I actually feel like? And I'm pretty sure 9 times out of 10 or something, I'm just saying from my own experience too, when I sit there, I'm like, oh my God, I'm craving pumpkin soup and broccoli. What? Like it's things that when you really tune into your body, you actually crave not what you possibly think. And somewhere along the lines, when we really learn to trust ourselves and really trust our intuition, and again, what our bodies are saying, our bodies are very clever in telling us what we're lacking in, what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm almost finished with my first cohort of that intuitive eating course, Feel Good with Food, that I'm running. And every single person on that course at the start of working together was like, oh, I really like what you're saying about intuitive eating, but I'm pretty sure if I do it, I'm just going to be eating chocolate 24/7. And, thankfully they put their trust in me and that trust in that whole process that I'm guiding them along. And they're like, oh, so, I do actually feel like chocolate sometimes, but then there's other times that I just really crave fruit and veggies. Isn't it wonderful to, feel like all foods and to not feel, I guess, more swayed towards one or the other?
Yeah. There was I'm on my phone now, so I can't look at it, but I've got an ebook from another intuitive eating coach. Elise is her first name, I think. I can't think of her last name. I'll have to look it up. And I might tag it in the show notes. And part of her, and I want to put a little flag note in here. This was how she ran her practice. And I don't want anyone just to listen to this and do this. I want them to get professional help, like to have a conversation with you before they were to do this. But I just want to give someone listening an example of how intuitive eating can work. So this particular coach, she's very well known around the world, and I probably should have picked up her name before, so apologies. Her method and theory was, when she worked with her clients, when they got to a certain point, said, right, for the next 3 days or 4 days, however they could actually cope. Ideally, she said, a week is a really good time span. I want you to eat whatever you want, whenever you want. And so and obviously this lady, her case study in particular was pizza. Like, this woman just couldn't get enough pizza. Would always buy 2 or 3 or 4 on her own because she was worried that there would never be enough. And so this woman, she goes, are you kidding me? Can I eat pizza for breakfast? And her practitioner was like, yep, whenever you want. So this woman, 4 or 5 days, just ate pizza all day, every day.
Wow.
She was living her dream in the beginning, and the feedback was, this is great. And then I think by day 5, she was like, oh, I'm craving vegetables now. And I actually don't want this now. So that particular modality for her worked, because she was like, oh, when I actually do give into it and I eat as much as I can all day, every day, there comes a point where I'm like, I'm not feeling good. I'm constipated. I've got a bloated stomach. And I don't feel good, but also I'm craving something I'm craving some vegetables now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that speaks, I really love that you use the word "to a certain point" there, or use the term there, because we need that stability, and we need that foundational level of, regular and adequate eating to be in place before we go into that. And not everybody does it, but on the whole, I reckon most people do. They need that stability. They need to be showing their body, like, we're not in a famine, we're not, under severe restriction right now. So they can, exactly as you said, go to that place where they're challenging those food beliefs and those food rules, and habituation, which is exactly that whole idea of, going quite ham or quite overboard on something in the beginning, and then it being like, oh, it's just, a normal thing. It's just food, or it's just a song. Eventually that habituation kicks in, but we need that foundational level to be put in place first and foremost.
Yeah, exactly. So you're talking about your intuitive eating course before, but you also have a ebook that, if anyone's listening to this and would like to know a bit more about what we've spoken about today, how can they get hold of your ebook?
Yeah, so they can get my free Making Peace with Food Kickstart kit or ebook via my website. So MaddiParsonsNutrition.com. Barbara, it would be awesome if you could put that in the show notes, just because there's so many renditions of the word Maddi.
Yep, sure. I definitely will. And they can just obviously subscribe and then download their ebook from there.
Yeah, it's a free download. It's available to anybody via my website, which is really cool.
Good. Okay. So download that, guys. Now, as I ask my listeners, as I ask my guests on my podcast, I'd love you to share, Maddi, with us one piece of advice or a little golden nugget that you've picked up over the time doing what you do, to share with my listeners today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If I may, can I tweak this a little bit and offer a quote? I'm feeling a little bit inspirational at the moment.
Yeah, go for it. That's awesome. I love it.
I think it speaks really, well, it does definitely speak quite nicely to everything that we've talked about today, Barbara. And I guess the, shame and guilt and embarrassment that can come with binge eating or with feeling, out of control around food or uncomfortable in our bodies. So it's a quote by Brené Brown. I really hope I did that name justice. But it reads that shame cannot survive being spoken. It cannot tolerate having words wrapped around it. What it craves is secrecy, silence, and judgment. If you stay quiet, you stay in a lot of self-judgment. And I think that speaks so nicely to binge eating, quite specifically, because it is inherently so secretive in nature. So I know it can seem like the last thing somebody wants to do, reaching out for support or talking about it. I definitely hope our talk here today has, inspired a few people, if you are struggling with binging, to reach out. But just know that because shame is so deep-rooted in binge eating, talking about it is actually one of the best things that you can ever do.
Yeah. I love that quote. Thank you.
That's okay.
For sharing that with us and having someone that's a safe person to open up to, because it is, I can guarantee there's people in your life that do this and you'd have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how good we are at binge eating. We hide it and people, may never know. Yeah.
Exactly, especially because it can exist in any body shape, body weight, shape or size. But
yeah, for sure. So if people listen to this, Maddi, and they want to reach out to you, they've got any questions from today or they'd like to work with you, how can they get hold of you?
You can contact me via the contact form on my website, or I am really, really present on Instagram. So at Maddi Parsons Nutrition. That's it. Right. I almost said .com, then I was like, wait, there's no .com.
That's all right. I'll put it all in the show notes and stuff, and obviously tag you on all the posts today when I load this episode up. But it's been such a pleasure to have you here today. We've shared a lot of thoughts and beliefs and our own personal journeys, and something that, especially in today's world, it's very PC. You can say this, you can't say this. You got to tiptoe around things, where my podcast will never be like that. I'm not like that. And thank you for just being so open and sharing your own personal journey, but also what you do in this world to help people break free from binge eating and live the life that they want to live.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on board, Barbara. It seems like we're very, very aligned in our beliefs around this particular topic, so it's been great.
Yeah, and we're very passionate that, I went to talk, you went to talk, then you go, no, I go.
I know. We made it work. We got through it.
We did. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and it has inspired you on your self-care journey. Please feel free to share this with a friend and subscribe over on Apple Podcast. I really love hearing your feedback, so guys, please feel free to write a review on Apple and let me know which part of this episode resonated with you the most. To fall in love with yourself is the first secret to happiness. To find out a bit more about Self-Care Studio or the Studio Chat podcast, head over to my Instagram page, self_care_studio, or on my website, selfcarebybarbarathompson.com.au. Really look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Look after you. And I'll catch you soon. Bye!